Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about this Young Turks segment where they call out the progressive left, and Ana Kasparian says the obvious, something she's been waiting to get off her chest for a very long time, and that is, of course, that the progressive left are the ones who made her life more difficult. They're the ones destroying her local community. And of course, this is in the follow-up to the 2024 election, but specifically on the local level, because while many people in my comments didn't quite understand in my video where I talked about California rejecting the Democrats in terms of ballot initiatives and candidates because they still voted Democrat at the presidential level, this is the undergirding trend behind the evil orange man's movement in these blue states and closing the gap on where he lost to Biden in the previous election year. And I think it's important to talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Look, we're going to get into this Young Turks video in just a little bit, but for those of you who are unaware, Ana is actually doing her own podcast, which is called the Unaligned Podcast. She's doing it over on Substack. I hope that she'll utilize her YouTube channel for at least portions of this podcast in the future, but there's actually a great interview that she has over there with this guy from the Manhattan Institute where they break this down specifically in much greater detail, and I actually learned something about some ballot initiatives in Colorado that I might have to talk about in a separate video, because I do think that some of those initiatives, even though they follow a positive trend of rejecting woke criminal justice, are actually bad policy. And contrary to popular belief, I'm not some crazy, we need to fry all the criminals and lose our senses about it. I'm somebody who wants good policy, so I might have to do a whole video explaining where they went wrong in Colorado, and maybe you'll learn something in that particular video. But right here, we lead it off with this clip from Ezra Klein talking about Democrats losing on the issue of crime.
The thing that surprised me least about the election was the sharp red shift in these big cities. Because if you just talk to anybody who lives in them, they are furious. And this idea that like, oh no, the economy is actually good or crime is actually down, this is all just Fox News. Like, shut the up with that.
So first of all, and to be clear, this is a sentiment that is going to be repeated by Ana Kasparian specifically, which is nice of you to bring this up now, Ezra Klein, after the election is actually over, because like many a left-winger, Ezra Klein was in denial about this particular issue. He was somebody who thought this was no big deal. The shifts right in the American electorate on the local level weren't a thing that was actually going to happen. And the thing is, we all knew that New York was shifting more to the right when Lee Zeldin came within 5 or 6 points of beating Kathy Hochul in the gubernatorial race. Again, Andrew Cuomo, the Democrat, won his previous races by no less than 20 points the previous times. And by the way, in many of those elections, he won by 30 points. So we're seeing the shift in these blue areas. It's been happening for quite a while. It's been happening on the local level as a consequence of crime and all this progressive nonsense that the Democrats are pushing. But only now, post the 2024 election, does Ezra Klein actually acknowledge it.
Congratulations, everyone. Libs have caught on to something that we figured out 2 years ago. Crime is a problem. And if you just tell people, voters specifically, that it's not a problem, and it was way worse in the 90s, so you shouldn't be complaining, there will be backlash. There will be blood, okay?
So two things that need to be said about what Ana just said. First and foremost, There Will Be Blood is actually a really good movie. It stars Daniel Day-Lewis. It's definitely a recommend from the Actual Justice Warrior channel. Secondly, if you notice, she's doing the thing where she's making fun of the lefties for saying crime's not as bad as the 1990s. And I mean, come on, guys. Do you not know where this counterattack comes from? Do you not know who was the first one to make fun of the lefties for bringing this up? Because of course, crime not being as bad as the 1990s doesn't mean anything. The 1990s were the worst period in American history in terms of violent crime. Saying something isn't as bad as the worst thing ever is crazy and absurd.
The sense of disorder rising, right? Not just crime, but homeless encampments, trash on the streets, people jumping turnstiles in subways, crazy people on the streets. you just talk to people and they're mad about it. They feel it's different than it used to be. I mean, in San Francisco, like the fury is overwhelming, and you see that it's not just the presidential level. London Breed, the SF mayor, just lost re-election. In Oakland, they recalled the mayor. A bunch of the progressive DAs across the country were recalled or beaten in re-election campaigns. If Eric Adams has a lot of problems, but if he were obviously on the ballot, he would almost certainly, it seems to me, lose. You have to be able to govern well. People don't follow politics, but they live in the place they live.
So look, Ezra Klein gives a decent summation of the outcome of the election, and we talked about this in our own video about the state of California rejecting the Democrats, rejecting the progressives. Pamela Price was recalled. Shang Tao, the mayor of Oakland, was recalled. Gascon lost his election handily to a Republican that was masquerading as an independent, but just 2 years ago, he was running for AG as a Republican. And you see all over the state, ballot initiatives cut in favor of the conservative position, of the tough on crime position. But you also see that Ezra Klein is an idiot, because he just said Eric Adams would lose his re-election if it happened today, which is ultimately true. But the thing is, Eric Adams is currently being brought down due to the migration issue and due to the various scandals involving corruption that he is currently under scrutiny for. That being said, Eric Adams winning the Democratic primary years ago against all these progressives who were running as more progressive than Bill de Blasio is an indication of the same phenomenon, because even though Eric Adams hasn't really delivered in this regard, and some of it is not his fault because of statewide bail reform, he's actually quite limited in what he can do, but he won the Democratic primary running as the most tough on crime Democrat. That was an indication years ago that this shift was happening, but Ezra Klein seems to totally have memory hold that or not even acknowledge that. These people act like they're so sophisticated in their analysis, but they have the memory of a squirrel. So I just wanted you guys to know that maybe in a few months, Ezra Klein will be denying that crime exists again, and that's because he doesn't have a good grasp on these issues, and that is proven out by the way he referenced Eric Adams along with those other progressive Democrats.
Yeah, I follow politics, and I also live in the place I live. And I've been furious for several years now. And everyone immediately, Anna's just a secret right winger. Anna's just a secret right winger. No. I'm not a secret right winger. I see the dysfunction, and I see working class Americans getting their catalytic converters stolen, okay, getting their homes broken into, getting assaulted on the subway or the train.
Look, I gotta be perfectly honest with you guys out there in the audience. Part of the reason we are covering this video is because we just got a good clip of Ana Kasparian that will be played in time and memoriam on this particular channel. So yeah, thank you for that, Anna. I really appreciate it. Also, she's not a secret right-winger. I find this to be the most ridiculous allegation from either the left or the right, that Anna has shifted dramatically to the right. She just came to sensible conclusions on crime. I don't know if you guys recall this channel before the crime spike, but we did not cover the day-to-day criminal justice issues like this. We covered specific cases that were prominent in the media, and the reason why is because there wasn't a stream of bad policy that led to broad bad results in the criminal justice system. I recognized this early on, so I talked about it. Ana Kasparian started recognizing it, one of the first on the left, so she started talking about it. That doesn't mean we had dramatic shifts in our political positions.
And I'm supposed to just shut my mouth about it and tell everybody everything's fine because it's not the 90s? No, I'm not gonna wait until after the election to talk about how it's a problem. I'm gonna talk about it well before the election, so maybe Democrats, maybe progressives can recalibrate. But that's the thing about the left. They don't believe in recalibrating, okay? They think they know it all. They think they're the best. They think that anyone who crosses them or tweaks them or critiques them is the bad guy. And congratulations, in the state of California, Donald Trump flipped 10 blue counties into red counties. Let's take a look at the map. This is the electoral map. First one on the left-hand side, of course, is from 2020. And then, would you look at that? One of the most liberal parts of the country has become increasingly red. I wonder why that happened.
Look, I have to give credit to Ana Kasparian for actually going out and doing this segment, because even though this is an I told you so, I was right kind of segment, and people tend to think that those are more ego-based, the fact of the matter is, Ana gets nothing but hate for covering these issues. She gets nothing but negative backlash for telling the truth on these particular topics. And that is something that she is subjecting herself to, because now the evidence is even more in than before when she was talking about it. And she's not afraid of that hate. And the crazy thing is I remember when she did the post on her Substack saying that she was launching her Unaligned podcast and all of that. And the post was super benign. It had commentary about the whole Twitter kerfuffle about birthing person or whatever. And people were raging out about that. So the people on the progressive left, not only do they hate new information, but they will be desperate and vicious and go crazy over Ana bringing up a 2-year-old tweet in one of her reasons why she's starting this new venture where she's trying to talk to people on the other side. That's where her opposition is at. These are the people that she's trying to convince. That is far more difficult than me trying to convince you of ideas that you might be more prone to receiving or listening to. But that's where Ana is on the Young Turks, doing it and being aggressive about it. And honestly, I appreciate it because it is funny. And she does get accused of being a secret right-winger. That's how they act.
Okay, in New York, last time Biden won Trump lost by 24. This time he only lost by 12. Remember, he was talking about how he was going to win New York, and of course he wasn't going to win New York, and that was outrageous. But what he was getting at is, I'm going to do a lot better than you expect, and he did. Except there was one show that expected it, and it was us. And so, look, I think that our advantage is that we're not bullied by the media gaslighting industrial complex.
Oh, Ana's just a secret right-winger. Ana's just a secret right-winger.
Look, I give Ana a lot of credit for sticking her neck out on these particular issues and taking the brunt of the heat for doing so. And to be clear, I give her some credit for dragging Cenk along with her, and I do give Cenk credit now for where he is now. But for him to say that we don't get bullied over here on the Young Turks by the left-wing mob is crazy and absurd in every possible way. Cenk, at one point, initially, when defund the police became a thing, said that he didn't like that because he thought it was bad framing, he thought it was bad politics, and he thought it would work against his position and his actual goals of police reform. Then, after being bullied mercilessly by the online left, Cenk gave in and he would say, okay, this is why we say defund the police. And then he would give that stupid, idiotic left-wing explanation about how you're removing funds, but you're putting it to these other programs that will prevent crime. And then he reverted back once he realized how toxic that was. So Cenk, 100%, despite the fact that he's playing internet tough guy, does get bullied by the progressive left. And a lot of people have been bullied by the progressive left. And I think it would be much better if he just acknowledged that, if he said that he doesn't want to do that anymore, but he did fall and actually reject his better judgment instead of saying, we've never been bullied by them. I would never do that.
And so there's two different factors here. So there's the extreme left.
Oh, Ana's just a secret right-winger.
Identitarian left, whatever we're calling them these days, right? So those guys say, no, crime is imaginary. It doesn't affect anyone. It's blah, 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 right? And I'm like, look, guys, first of all, look at the stats. The stats are clear. In fact, I was on Hassan's show, my nephew, and he pulled up the stats as we were doing the debate on it, and the stats showed that I was right. So there's no question about it. And then you go talk to real people. Can you guys please, everybody overused the term touch grass, but go talk to non-political people.
Now, Cenk ends up saying that you should talk to average everyday people instead of people online, and this is 100% true. He gives his own examples, but honestly, you can watch the full video. It's linked in the description if you want to check it out, but I will give my own examples. So my brother works a normal job. My brother, by the way, not super into politics. He's more into it now than he was before, but when he was working a normal job, he was right across the street from a Rite Aid, and he noticed and told me that the same person would go into that Rite Aid each and every day, steal a bunch of stuff, the police would be called, and he would be back the very next day. And my brother thought this was absolutely crazy because he worked a normal 5 to 6 day a week schedule at his place of business, and every day around the same time, sometimes twice a day, he would watch this store get robbed by the same person. And by the way, there were additional robbers, additional retail thieves at this location and nobody was doing anything. This is something that a bunch of New Yorkers, a bunch of people in blue cities that work in your little town square, your downtown area, wherever there's stores, are experiencing. This is something that people who live in suburbs that might drive to the pharmacy are experiencing in these blue cities or in the suburbs around these blue cities. This is not normal. This is not how it used to be. And people are angry over that. Again, talk to your regular people that don't follow politics. Ask them what they think about crime, or if they think it's going up or down or whatever. Just get an assessment of them and you'll find out that they're really worried about it more times than not.
Donald Trump put up the best Republican performance for a Republican nominee for president in at least 20 years, if not the entire 21st century. We're talking about Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco. Across the map, Donald Trump put up historically strong numbers for Republican candidate, for president, in places that, truthfully, if you had asked me 8 years ago, I would have never thought possible.
No, I mean, it is really stunning. So what exactly is driving it?
What's driving it? You know, I think immigration, one of the things you mentioned earlier on in that last segment, is part of it, but I think crime is a big part of it as well.
Yep.
If you look at Gallup polling and you ask Democrats nationwide, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with our efforts to control and bring down the crime rate? What you see is the dissatisfaction number now versus a decade ago. Look at that. The unsatisfied number from 35% to 58%. The satisfied number dropped by 20 points.
So they end up cutting to this segment where they break down how Trump outperformed Republicans in this century in New York, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, these major liberal hubs. And then they go to the satisfaction or dissatisfaction with policies meant to address crime. And by the way, they're polling Democrats. And what you see is we have a complete and total inversion from 2014 to 2024. In 2014, which by the way, in the state of California, that's when they voted in Prop 47, which made it much easier for people to steal stuff. We ended up with 35% of the population of Democrats unsatisfied with policies to fight crime, as opposed to 59% being satisfied. 2024, just 10 years later, 58% of Democrats are unsatisfied, while 39% are satisfied. This is a dramatic swing among Democrats, and again, this is a trend that you could detect that was obvious, and I talked about it ad nauseum when we were having the Democratic primary for mayor in New York City, and Eric Adams came out on top.
That's okay. Just go to them and tell them everything's fine. Crime isn't as bad as it was in the 90s.
So first of all, based on this clip alone, Anna needs to change her podcast from Ana Kasparian Unaligned to Ana Kasparian Unchained, because she is maximizing her sarcasm levels to a way that I can appreciate while mocking this ridiculous and absurd talking point related to the 1990s. Again, saying something is not as bad as the worst period in time in that particular category in the nation's history is never a good counter.
That's not politics, okay? That's not trying to win. That's digging your heels in and insisting that you're right, even as there's widespread concern over these issues. Look, the main role of government is to protect its citizens. And in these situations, in these blue cities, when the public doesn't feel that Democratic leadership is doing enough to protect working class people, okay, they're not going to favor the Democrats. And as they're being gaslit, they're just going to increasingly get angry. How do I know that? Because I've experienced it firsthand myself. And so ask Cenk, I mean, over the last few years, month after month, the anger just continues to like compound. Because it's like we are headed toward that iceberg. Are you guys going to adjust? Are you guys going to turn the wheel? Or are you just going to go barreling toward that iceberg? And Democrats, with the help of progressives on this issue, were like, nah, we like the iceberg. We're going to barrel for it.
I said, don't hit the iceberg on Biden. She said, don't hit the iceberg on crime. We were not listened to. I'll come back to that in Ezra Klein in a second. But I want to tell you a couple of really...
So look, obviously Anna is right in this regard. And by the way, one of the tactics that they were using was manipulated crime statistics in order to tell you that crime was down. And I have done a bunch of different videos on how the gathering method from the Uniform Crime Report had changed in the very same year that crime suddenly and oddly dropped without explanation. And it turns out that they've actually revised those statistics, which is something that I warned you was very likely to happen because you had a new statistical gathering method that a bunch of different agencies weren't participating in. And what did we discover? The 2% drop in crime that they were talking about in 2022 didn't actually happen. It was a 4% increase, and we can expect a revision like this to happen for the 2023 numbers. So these people are not right on anything. And by the way, the victimization surveys continuously showed increases in crime. One of the reasons why I knew that there were issues with the Uniform Crime Report was because of the victimization surveys. And this is what the left tries to offer you. Not as bad as the 90s. Oh, look at these statistics. Ignore the fact that the statistical gathering method has changed, and don't worry about it.
Why did the corporate Democrats go along with the identitarian left in passing these weird laws that of like as I keep going back to, taking the felonies and put them into misdemeanors, and that drove up crime, et cetera, in places like California and New York?
To turn the public against progressives so they never accomplish the economic policies.
That could be it. And if
no, that is it. Progressives are powerless now. Okay, they have no credibility. They are completely powerless. They refused to recalibrate. They continued promoting policies that made the lives of working class people far worse in liberal cities, okay? And now no one's gonna listen to them when it comes to the bread and butter issues. Yeah. They have no power. I mean, it's just so ridiculous to me, but that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So when people tuned into our election coverage, and they were like, well, why isn't Ana upset? I wasn't upset because I knew it was coming.
So this is where I'm going to disagree with Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur and their framing on this particular issue. Because Cenk is saying, why did the corporate Democrats, the establishment Democrats, go along with these progressive activists in terms of these particular policies related to criminal justice reform? And Ana says it was a way to smear them, to disempower the progressives. But honestly, I don't think that your mainline establishment Democratic Party is playing this 5-dimensional chess game. The reason why a bunch of these laws ended up getting passed into law, well, first of all, in California, some of them were voted on via ballot initiatives, so it's due to popular support. But the reason why these laws were put in post-2020 was because of the Black Lives Matter riots. All that fervor and racial fervor that was stirred up by the Democratic Party in order to propel them to electoral victory had consequences on the policy level. And again, a bunch of different progressives, and Cenk and Ana are among them, were pushing for these progressive prosecutors to be elected. And by the way, some of these progressive prosecutor races were highly funded by George Soros and other wealthy progressive activists. And considering that district attorneys' races are not typically so money heavy, that advantage allowed a bunch of these people to get elected. So to me, this is where they get into conspiratorial territory. Again, it is a consequence of progressives' own actions that people don't want to listen to them, not some conspiracy by the Democratic Party. Also, I want to point out that a bunch of Democrats that are connected to the establishment took heavy losses due to these policies as well. I mean, we did an entire video breaking down Gavin Newsom's underhanded, dirty tactics in order to shut down the battle against Prop 47. This guy is a corporate Democrat as defined by TYT, but he is definitely advocating for that progressive ballot initiative because he considered that a part of his own legacy. Again, I'm not into this conspiratorial, this wing of the Democratic Party is sabotaging this wing in this way. This is just the natural development of passing all these laws when crime was down, thinking that, again, they would have no impact because you were told over and over again that this actually didn't do anything to address crime, that backfiring, and then people responding to that backfiring.
If I recall correctly, Gavin Newsom didn't hesitate in vetoing the state program that would be similar to Medicare for all. He did not hesitate when it came to that. But he also didn't hesitate when it came to shutting down 4 state prisons, releasing tens of thousands of inmates into the public with no plan for them whatsoever. No transitional plan, no real data indicating that anyone had been rehabilitated in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And we were just supposed to, no, this is great. I mean, the carceral state is a problem. And so we should just willy-nilly, without a plan in place, release tens of thousands of people into the most expensive state to live in during the coronavirus pandemic when all the businesses were shut down and there were no jobs available for people. Congratulations.
Again, Anna, I understand your frustration with this, but let us look at who was advocating for that. It was many in the progressive left talking about how the prisons were unsafe for these individuals, talking about how California prisons were overcrowded. The ACLU was suing them in order to force them to decarcerate, to let people out. And again, you had movements on the left like abolish prisons that became more prominent post the Black Lives Matter riots.
Do we want people who smoke pot to go into prison? Absolutely not. Did we want the draconian laws? Absolutely not. But we never said let all the prisoners go. When did we say that? Okay, and so that's why the establishment Democrats joining league with the identitarian left to protect their donors turned into a giant disaster for progressives, for the left, and for the Democratic Party.
Again, I'm somebody who likes me a conspiracy theory, but the facts are what they are. There's actually a very logical, open to the public explanation for how the progressive left gained power in these local elections through these ballot initiatives in order to make our country worse.
And now the pendulum's swinging to an area that I'm uncomfortable with as well, right? Because now there's a lot of going back to some of the failed policies that we were against. And by the way, I mean, look, 70% of voters in California approved Proposition 36, which is a reversal of an earlier ballot measure that everyone was lied to about, right? Like the whole idea was, hey, we're gonna stop putting people in prison for minor drug offenses or drug possession. In reality, what that proposition from 2014 did is it lessened all sorts of serious felonies into misdemeanors. And now no one in the state trusts the left on these issues. And so there was a ballot measure this time around regarding forcing inmates to do labor, right, against their will. And it had no opposition, right? Like it was supposed to ban prisons from being able to do that to inmates. No one opposed that ballot measure, and that ballot measure failed.
Anna is right about this, and one of the reasons why I know Anna is correct about this particular issue is because we covered this on my channel. When I talked about California rejecting the left, rejecting the Democrats, I spoke specifically about this ballot initiative, which again would have amended the Constitution to disallow the state of California from forcing prisoners to work to perform labor. And despite the fact that there was no money behind the opposition or anything like that, people were so suspicious of it, they voted it down. And by the way, when I first started shooting that video, it was like 51-49. Who knew how it was going to come out? And to my shock, while I was editing, it actually jumped to about 54-46. So it actually expanded the voting it down in terms of the ballot initiative, which is absolutely wild because it's sold exactly in the same way that Cenk Uygur is about to sell it to you, despite the fact that we're talking about prisoners and forced labor, and they are paid for that forced labor.
No, that ballot measure outlawed slavery, and it failed.
It failed.
That's disgusting. That should have passed. It should have passed 99-1. I don't know who's pro-slavery other than Mark Robinson in North Carolina.
Yeah, so it was sold as an anti-slavery law, which yes, you could define the forced labor even though it's paid for prisoners as slavery, but this is considered widely to be deceptive framing in my opinion, because it was about forced labor, which is the one exemption to the 13th Amendment of the Constitution for prisoners, and again, in the state of California, they were paid to do so. Now, again, I'm not somebody who's celebrating this as a great victory or anything of the sort. I'm just pointing out that liberal California looked at that ballot initiative, looked at the fact that nobody was opposing it, and they greeted it with such suspicion that they voted it down.
And so, but because the Democrats are now so deeply distrusted, that failed.
Exactly.
Let alone the $18 minimum wage. But last thing on the crime, and then I got to go back to Ezra for a second because it's important. So the identitarian left pretended that they were the sole voice of all Democrats. Well, we all told you, no, they don't speak for the Democratic Party. They just, I kept saying, who voted on this? Who voted on this? Who made you the king of the Democrats?
So look, I'm obviously very happy where Ana Kasparian is at. I'm happy that Cenk is trudging along in the right direction in some regards. But the fact that this guy is going to pretend that he's not a part of the identitarian left, that he wasn't pushing these divisive racial topics, that he hasn't been constantly attacking white people, calling everybody racist, calling each and every unicorn case that they choose to highlight where a black person is victimized by a cop or by a white person, a case of racism, is absurd on its face. And honestly, I can't tolerate this at this level because Cenk, you were in that camp. You want to talk about who voted for this? You did. You probably voted for that ballot initiative. Ana is at least woman enough to admit that she voted for it in 2014. She says that she was lied to, but the facts are what they are. You guys were pushing this for years. I'm glad you're in the right position now, but only one of the two people here are acknowledging that they've actually moved their position in the correct direction. The other one is trying to pretend like he was never in that camp. Cenk, you 100% were there.
I know, it's infuriating because Ezra, where were you? Where were you even a few months ago? Okay, because it was very public and it was a big deal when everyone was dogpiling me as the big baddie for bringing up these issues. So you didn't have to come and support me 2 years ago. You didn't have to do it a year ago. But how about a month ago? Now all of a sudden, after the Democrats suffer a shellacking of the century, Ezra Klein has his come to Jesus moment and realizes that there's a real problem with crime in these blue cities. Congratulations.
So look, obviously I have become a big defender of Ana. In fact, I'm somebody who was very successful attacking Ana when she was wrong and somehow have created this new genre of people on the right that are actually celebrating Ana when she's in the right. And yes, I am aware that I am often imitated but never duplicated. However, one of the reasons why I'm on board for this journey is one, it would be just wrong of me to attack this person when she's wrong over and over and over again and not acknowledge when she's right. But two, I find her to be hilarious because she's calling out Ezra Klein for not backing her a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, and just jumping on board post-election, and I 100% agree. Because what this is that moment of reflection post-election, and I know that there's a feeling that in the future, when Ana's still talking about these issues in the same serious way, people like Ezra Klein will jump ship and just back the Democrat and do the blue no matter who thing. Well, look what that got you. Ana is right about this, and yes, people should have the honor to come forward and say, I was wrong about where the American people are at, but instead they do this, oh, they must be being tricked and it's manufacturing consent. And did you see that poll where people think crime is at all-time highs? What a bunch of dumb rubes, even though, again, they know intuitively it's going up. Whether or not people understand that it's all-time highs or just elevated from previous years is irrelevant, especially when you're polling people that weren't really alive or politically active in the 1990s, so they don't know what the all-time level of crime is. Again, after nearly 30 years of declining crime, we've seen an upswing. You shouldn't be surprised that people don't remember the 30-year gap. I know that because I researched this, but average ordinary people will tell you it's as bad as it's ever been, and it makes perfect sense because if you're 35 years old in New York City, you don't really have a good grasp of what the crime levels were like when you were 5 years old in New York City.
Look, I said this on day one. I'm going to repeat it even with greater fervor today. I think that what Texas did makes sense. And so I know that a lot of people on the left don't want to hear that. But think about it, guys. So they had this immigration problem all along, and it wasn't spread out to many different states. It was just in Texas, and of course, the other border states. And the federal government kept saying, man, I don't care. Okay. Now, to be fair to the federal government, it doesn't just quite say that. It has a lot of different programs in place. And the border states said, why? Why do we have to shoulder all of this by ourselves? And started shipping it to other places that were more left-wing and said they were more open to immigrants. So you're open to immigrants? Here you go. Here's immigrants. And now all of a sudden, New York realizes, okay, well, being open to immigrants has consequences.
Look, they actually play a clip of Cenk a year ago, and this is something that he does deserve credit for when he was praising in terms of the politics Greg Abbott's policy of shipping migrants to other parts of the country because he thought it was greatly politically successful. And let's give Cenk credit. He did say that back in September 2023. And in fact, I gave him credit for that back then. So in this regard, Cenk is right. He was right back then. And I wish he would be more honest about the stuff that he was wrong about. But right here, he is actually self-congratulating himself for a good purpose, for a legitimate purpose. But make no mistake about it, he definitely was on the identitarian left. Both of them were. Anna's the only one who acknowledges it.
Yeah, well, I'm done with that. And so I'm not for either party, and I'm gonna do my job and my analysis, and I wanna make it very clear to people watching the show. Do not expect me to be an activist for any side, because at this point, that's a losing strategy, especially with the Democrats who just refuse to take any advice, refuse to adjust, refuse to recalibrate. And honestly, when I look at which party has made my life worse, and it's because local politics has more of an impact on your day-to-day life, it's the Democrats. And they need to accept that and change. And if they don't, well, they're gonna keep losing support, even in cities like Los Angeles and even in states like California.
And there you have the chef's kiss from Ana Kasparian, where she reveals that she doesn't want to advocate for either side, even though she probably tends more towards the Democratic Party in terms of her politics, because when she looks at who's made her life worse, it is in fact the Democrats, and she's 100% right. And the reason she gave, that the Democrats are the party that controls her local government and that has more impact on you, is also correct. I say this time and time again, your politics in terms of a national level, those should be considered more abstract than your local politics, which unfortunately people don't pay enough attention to. And by the way, I feel a very similar way. There's a reason why there's a disproportionate amount of New York City stories on this channel, not because New York City is the most crime-ridden city. In fact, it is just not factually. It's one of the lesser on that scale, even though it's getting worse, is because I live in New York City and these are policies that impact me. These are policies that I understand. I mean, I did a story the other day about a break-in, which by the way, far too few of you watched, and it was at a flower shop. That flower shop was actually across the street from where I got married, from the wedding venue, which is absolutely crazy when I think of that high-end neighborhood having to deal with migrant criminals trying to break into a flower shop in order to get into a jewelry store. Now look, that's where I want to leave it for you guys today. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me, support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Ana Kasparian trashing the Democrats. Till next time.